I'd like to transition us to welcome our guest presenter, Kenna Stormo Gibson. She is the Director of Housing Policy at the Hawaii Appleseed Center for Law and Economic Justice. Kenna has a strong interest in how Hawaii can best pay for public goods in an equitable and efficient way. She completed a master's in public affairs from UC Berkeley and wrote her thesis on how to support affordable housing in Hawaii through public infrastructure financing. Since graduating, she has worked for the Public Policy Center at the University of Hawaii Manoa on transit-oriented development and as a bills researcher for the Hawaii State Senate Committee on Ways and Means. As a researcher, she enjoys making complicated financial topics accessible and relatable so that decision makers and public can push for a more equitable society. Aloha, Kenna, and mahalo for joining us. You're on mute right now.
There we go. Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here. And I'm seeing some familiar faces, which is great because it means that a lot of people who care about housing are getting in alignment. I know I presented some stuff to the Small Business Association. So Dennis and Susan, I recognize you from that call. So I don't want to be too repetitive here, but maybe what I'll do is I'll share just a couple slides from that meeting, and then because one thing Appleseed is doing is we're part of a statewide housing coalition. And I can update people on what's happening at the state ledge a little bit, and then come back to this topic of, at the county level where our resources. Does that sound good? Okay. So, and how much time do I have, Janice? I wasn't quite sure.
I think you have until, let me get back to that screen. Until about 11:50.
Oh, okay. Great. So I do want to leave a room and time for questions. I could probably be on this topic for 2 hours, but I don't want to overwhelm everybody. So let me do a little screen share here. Oh, hang on. Just bear with me a little bit here. All right, so I can make this a slideshow. And all right, so great. I think we're good. You guys can see the screen? Whoops. Yeah? Okay. So I apologies to people who already saw this earlier, Janice, Susan. But I just want to lay some groundwork to that we are having a really crisis moment in our housing, and it's not surprising, but the data shows it as well. And this is data from home sales on Maui County, backing it up from 2016 to 2020. And again, this is just houses being sold in the market, right? And this was part of the Maui County Comprehensive Housing Plan that Hawaii Appleseed worked on, along with Hawaii Community Assets. They took the lead on that project. Have people heard about the Maui County Comprehensive Housing Plan? Some people? Well, it was great. It was a county-funded plan, and we got to do research for it, but it had a very strong community engagement component. So the Maui County plan, 1,600 community members were engaged in meetings, in community outreach, in one-on-ones, in stakeholder meetings. So Jeff Gilbreth of Hawaii Community Assets did a great job of bringing everybody into the conversation. And I want to put that forward because as a researcher, it's rare that you get to bring forward data and then really bring it to the community, right? It's not so helpful when there's a study and like 5 people read it. And I know this because I've written those studies where 5 people read the study and four of them, you know, actually understand section J, paragraph 1, right? So I just want to say that this data was created as part of the Maui County Housing Plan, but what was great is that we got to take this data out to community members. And so then when the plan came forward to the city council, it was not just a few policy analysts and you know, experts. It was the community came forward and said, we support this plan. And the community in Maui has been pushing on their council to say, hey, we need to really get serious about housing. So I just wanted to lay that background because we are encouraging every county to engage in some sort of similar process to bring more community members into this conversation in an informed way, right? So, but back to this slide, what you can see is that the dark blue is going up, and that means that the person who purchased that house is not going to live in it. They are not claiming an owner-occupied exemption. So this trend over just these 4 years, and we don't have 2021 data yet, but is concerning, right? Because what it tells us is that in the year 2020 in Maui, 7 out of 10 properties that were purchased were investment homes. Meaning that maybe the person rents it out, maybe they don't, maybe they leave it empty. We're not sure, but they're not occupying it as an owner occupant. Does anyone have any questions or comments on like why this is a concerning trend? No? Yeah, go ahead, Janice.
I'm just curious because we were having a similar conversation this morning in our data hui, and just wondering if you could share, and it doesn't have to be now, but maybe we could connect where I'm interested in your data sources, like where you pull data from to get this infographic. Yeah,
it's, you know what, I didn't know how in the weeds people wanted to get, but let me pull up, did my screen share stop?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can totally just send, like we could totally have a conversation offline.
You know, no, I want everybody to, you know, this is my role is to explain things. So I showed these slides at the Small Business Association meeting, so I'll just pull them up real quick. Give me a minute. But it came from the Hawaii Information Service. And people were that this, you can just subscribe. And they collate all the data from county, you know, permitting departments, and it's all public data. But what they do is they just make it easy to access through their portal, I mean, through their website. Are people familiar with Hawaii Information Service, HIS? So if you're familiar, there's great data in there. And I'll do a little screen share to show, walk people through a little bit how we got this. So, and then Janice, I'm more than happy to answer any even further questions. But hold on, I gotta get back to the screen share moment. Okay, is this it? Okay. Somehow, 1 second. All right, well, I guess I'm having a little bit of technical, no, Okay, am I sharing screen? Can you see my screen now? No? Okay, I gotta stop and redo it. Sorry, that's what's going on. Okay, let's do this again. Thank you for your patience, everyone. But I really do want to bring everyone into this conversation so we can all understand, because this does come up. Like, how do you know that? Where's the data? Okay, now you can see this screen. Yep. Okay, I know I can make this bigger. All right. Zoom management is not my, but okay, we can see this. Hawaii Information Service, yeah? They collect data on properties, what's sold, what's not sold. If they have a homeowner exemption, if they don't, you can go back in time. You can pull up every property sold in, 1994 if you want, right? And then what we had to do was look at every home sold in Maui for the different years. And then we had to filter it by taking out all the sales that were like just an empty lot or just a parking stall, or, sales that were not what we would think of as a normal market arm's length sale, right? So we were able to filter out all the property sales that were not what you would think of as a house being sold or a condo being sold, right? And then we just looked at how many are claimed an owner occupancy exemption versus how many did not. And it's a simple concept. You got to be careful with your data a little bit and how to sort all these things out, but it's definitely possible, and that's how we did it. Does that answer your question? Yeah, great. So the other thing, so we did that for Maui, and as part of the plan, and then Kauai County contacted us and said, oh my gosh, we would love to get that data for our county. And even though we're not doing a Kauai County housing plan right now, we're trying to push on them to do it. We did go ahead and run the data for Kauai, partly because they're pretty small, like, their population made this not a crazy project. So we did it for Kauai. And again, we see a similar trend here, right? And what's powerful about this is we're not just looking at 1 year, but when you really look over the course of these 5 years, that's where you can really see the trend. And that's where it becomes even more concerning, because my guess is that it's maybe even worse last year, right? And so it doesn't take much to look at this trend and say, whoa, wait a minute. What if we get to the point where 8 out of 10 homes being sold are investment properties, right? And hopefully this trend does not continue this quickly, but if it does, we're going to get there pretty quick, right? So any questions on that?
Hey, Kenna.
Again, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, no question, but I just had a comment. I get so many calls from realtors, mortgage companies, all with these concerns. So this data for me just confirms their fears, their complaints, their comments, that folks from outside of Hawaii County are coming in and are outbidding locals to get homes. And I've never heard it before, but I actually get realtors calling me that they don't have any properties left to sell. So we normally get calls from people who are looking for housing, right? And can we get help with housing? But I'm actually getting calls from realtors saying we don't have properties to sell anymore. So, it's getting pretty bad. And I just wanted to say to the group that when Kenna and I had previously connected in your presentation, I really do want to connect to see how we can get some of this data done for Hawaii County, and have already made some calls to secure us, because I know you need to get housing production numbers, things like that. So I'm pretty confident that we can get that data for you. I think it'd be important to try and get similar data for Hawaii County.
Yeah, I just want to follow up, Susan, and then we can go to other folks. But I appreciate you sharing those individual stories. You know, I'm not on Big Island, so I don't get those phone calls. But what I would want to put forward to everybody on this call is, I would really encourage Big Island to consider funding a comprehensive housing plan, because that way it allows me to pull this data, right? Because initially we were funded to do that as part of the Maui County Housing Plan. And then it allows us to bring that data to community members, so that community members can also say, you know, that resonates. And now what can we do about that? And we have policy tools. There are tools, there are options. But if I'm just in a room talking to 5 people, you know, so that's, I guess, yeah, just thank you for sharing. And I see some hands up, so we can go with that. I see Dennis and Kanani and Nikki. Oh, Dennis, did you have a hand? Did you have a comment?
Yeah, well, yeah, just a caveat to your data. Just because it's investor owned doesn't mean it's being taken out of the local housing pool, because those could be investor owned for rental to local members of the community. You know, my impression is that's not necessarily happening here on the Big Island, but I know that is a trend on the mainland, where corporations are buying single family houses, considerable number of them, and putting in, seeing rental as a valid big revenue stream. That's all, just a caveat to that.
No, actually, Dennis, that's a really important point. And I want to say that this came up in the Maui community engagement process, right? And so there was the concern. Well, no, here's what I want to say. Part of the Maui plan was we need to pay for the local housing that we need through taxes on these investment properties, right? That was a key part of the plan. We can't stop this. We don't have the legal authority to say you cannot sell your home for market price, right? That is not an existing policy tool. Maybe it is in Singapore. It is not an existing policy tool in the United States. However, you can tax investment properties and say, we're going to use that money to pay for the housing we need. But to your point, Dennis, in Maui, there were a lot of people that said, hey, wait a minute, do we really want to tax people if they have a long-term renter? What if they are renting to someone long-term and they and that rental price is affordable? So what they decided that they wanted to do was they would exempt investment properties that could prove they had a long-term renter. And so Maui passed an ordinance saying, show us your rental agreement, send it into the county department, and then you will not be in this higher tax bracket, right? And again, this came out of that process of us bringing data and policy tools, but also being in engagement with community members so that these kind of questions could come up and we could think through how to address it. Right? And I will say community members felt that that was very fair. Okay, you have a long-term renter, you don't have a crazy high rental price, you won't be in this higher tax bracket. Does that address some of what you were bringing up, Dennis? Yeah, okay. Okay, we'll go to Kanani.
Thank you, Kenna. I would like to confirm that, yes, indeed, when I look at the housing rental market availability, we see the inventory, especially on the west side, very, very slim to none. And when it is advertised and available or pops up as available, it's like way out of, like, you know, even kids who are paid pretty well as, like, you know, starting fighter salaries and stuff like that. It's still not affordable, you know, and or, you know, a lot of their peers at the hotels, they're making, you know, anywhere between 50 to 60,000. starting, and they're sleeping in the parking lots. You know, and the hotel knows for decades now and provides amenities and facilities to help them shower before their shift and eat at the cafeteria, stuff like that. Understanding that, you know, gas prices, we know the story. So what we need to do is we need to work with developers who have an investment, yes, but put the community first and call for new models of
Yes.
economic thriving and diversity. And one of those things that we're starting to do is with a developer who's been long time on the Big Island, actually gave and fulfilled their affordable housing commitment decades ago, but decided that these new times call for um, more commitment to the community. And a portion of every sale would go to the well-being of the community as well as the natural resources that have been impacted by development over time, but also a full dedication of land as well as access and amenities and infrastructures to get there for communities that are working and maybe making even as low as $20,000 to $30,000 a one unit workforce housing, going for, I don't know what the amount is, Susan, but I think it's something like 500 or 600 a month. Now that is affordable.
Yep.
And right in the resort core, that's what we need to call forward, are those kinds of models more and more, and encourage that.
So thank you for bringing that up, Kanani. And I'm gonna, building off what you were saying, because everything you're saying makes sense. I want to share an article here, and I've been sharing it a lot. And this is How to Save a Ski Town, and came out recently. And this is about ski towns that are popular tourist places like, you know, Vail, Colorado. They name some other towns, but similar to Hawaii, where a lot of people want a second home there, you know, a lot of wealthy folks buying up the properties. And so these towns are falling apart. But one important difference is that, you know, Vail, Colorado, like if people get priced out, maybe they move to, I don't know, Boulder or something, right? But I think for us, we are an island in the middle of the Pacific. It's not so simple that you just, I mean, actually, I think people from Maui are moving to Big Island, so we have a little bit that way, right? But it's not so simple that you can just, oh, now I have a 2-hour commute to work instead of, right? So I want people to read that article because this is happening in places, but in Hawaii, it's extra concerning because of our location, right? And just what everybody's saying today. And then the other thing, Kanani, that I want to lift up is you bringing up, what are these other models for creating housing that is really affordable? And, you know, one thing that has come up in our housing coalition meeting is that DHHL has a model. And, you know, our #1 priority as a statewide group has been pushing on that 600 million for DHHL. And we all support beneficiaries having housing. But there's another layer to this, which is that this model that DHHL has is actually a great affordable housing homeownership model. And so we had Blossom Feitera from Maui, who helped found Hawaii Community Assets, come and speak to our coalition about how DHHL makes their homes affordable, right? So I'm just gonna share a couple slides because she presented on this at our last meeting on February 4th. So if you guys all bear with me, if you can be patient with my Zoom skills here, okay? I want to share with you some of the lessons that Blossom was telling us about DHHL. So give me a moment. And again, the reason is because actually a lot of the tools that DHHL uses, the state of Hawaii could use for non-beneficiaries. Now, of course, DHHL is doing it on their land, their Hawaiian homestead land, and that's great. But there's no reason these tools can't be used on other land and be for everybody. right? I mean, if you really think about it, DHHL is the largest community land trust in the United States. It has 9,900 homes for ownership that are price restricted, and that when you sell, it's a formula. You get this much, you resell it based on a formula. You don't sell it for market price in DHHL regulations, right? So, okay, let me bring forward this these slides. I just had this. Blossom. Here we go. Are people familiar with Blossom Fitira? Very wise person. Been around a long time. It was great to have her as a guest speaker. So here we go. All right, we're gonna do a share screen. Okay. All right, people can see this, yeah? Nope, not yet, it's loading. Yes, can we see? Okay, so so this is the current thinking around how to spend that 600 million, right? Again, it's early in the process. We don't know yet exactly what will happen, okay? But what I want to call out is that 300 million of that is for infrastructure. As we know, DHHL will need sewers, roads, electrical, all that stuff, right? And then another 40 to 50 million, you know, for current DHHL projects that need repair and maintenance and help. Makes sense. But what I want to call out is there's a conversation about spending $250 million for essentially homeowner assistance. And what that means is helping people with their down payments, making the mortgage affordable, making it so that somebody who's earning $1,500 a month can afford that home, right? And so Blossom talked about some programs they have, and I know I'm running up on time here, okay? But I just want to point out, they have these cool programs where they get matching money, so that if you save $1,000, you can get 6,000 matching funds for your down payment, right? And this is HUD supported. It's not a Native Hawaiian specific thing. This is just a program that they use to help their beneficiaries, right? They do split mortgages where DHHL will basically subsidize part of the mortgage. And then that person only has to pay for 40, 50, 60% of the mortgage, right? This is the tool that other agencies can use. This is not specific to beneficiaries. It's just a tool DHHL has been using. There's Section 8 vouchers that you can use for mortgages. Again, every county has this tool. It's just a matter of if we're using it. But again, someone earning $1,500 a month on a Section 8 voucher that's going towards a mortgage, they will only be paying $450 for that mortgage, right? So what Blossom pointed out to us is that, what does DHHL do? Public money for infrastructure. And then they put up the initial financing for construction. But they work with private developers. Stanford Carr will build, private developers build homes for DHHL, right? They get paid in a different way than when they're using private financing. So I know I'm coming up on time right here, but I just wanted to point out that we actually have some great models here in Hawaii, but sometimes it's a matter of thinking through how can we better use these and kind of make them more accessible and use some of the tools that are out there. Okay, how's that?
Mahalo nui, Kenna. Before we wrap up, and while you're still in the hot seat, I'm wondering if you could give us the elevator overview of the State Housing Coalition.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been any participation from Hawaii Island representatives And why possibly should folks in this room care or lean into participating and engaging in that?
Thank you, Janice. Yes, Hope Services has been attending a lot of our meetings. So Brandy has been on our meetings. Kristen has been super involved in our policy subcommittee meetings. You might know her, Kristen Alice. Everybody is invited. We just started this up basically in November, and it grew out of, initially, we were bringing people together to push on federal legislation, the Build Back Better. And then people that we gathered, like housing stakeholders, housing advocates, said, hey, what are we going to do for ledge session? So it expanded out from there. And one of our guiding principles is we include people with lived experience of houselessness or housing insecurity in all of our work, all of our meetings, all of our policy meetings. We always be sure to include those voices. And so, yeah, I would encourage people to join and listen in. We had people from all 4 islands at our last call. Sterling Higa, he's here. He's been with us pretty much since December. And we have our monthly meetings the Wednesday. It's been the first Wednesday of the month from 5 to 6:30. And Sterling, would you like to say anything about your experience?
Yeah, I can just briefly say it's a great group of people who are coming at housing from a bunch of different angles. And I think it's a productive forum, especially for thinking through how to move the needle on policy at the state level. So I've been very grateful to participate. And I definitely have learned a lot, including from people like Blossom who've come to give guest presentations to the group.
Question. Thank you for your presentation, sir. In the past on Oahu, especially noticeable, developers were able to opt out of certain requirements by providing monies or other things that the governments were able to just sign off on it. And I believe affordable housing was one section that was kind of minimized at one time. What's the policies? Is there any kind of read on that nowadays? Because they were able to move more projects towards the luxury type or provide more units in their project because they did something else in return. And so that became an issue. And then at one point, a couple of developers, I forgot who they were, but they just flat out didn't want to deal with affordable housing. Okay. And so my other point is, has there ever been a moratorium or semi-moratorium on developers focusing on the luxury homes and where we do have incentives for more of the housing in the less affordable areas? Thank you.
Yeah, Kenna.
I guess I wanted to say, to answer your question, Brian, on a higher level, the best way to incentivize housing at the pricing you want is for the public to finance it, so that a developer is getting paid by the public, whether it's HHFDC or they're getting paid by DHHL or they're getting paid by some other public putting up the money. Because when a developer has to get their money from private investors and private banks, that's when they have to promise certain things and they have to maximize their returns on the private market to essentially keep their investors happy, right? Now it's okay. It's all right to do that model, but you're only ever going to get whatever it is, 20%, 25%. We can go back and forth on what that number is that you can get.
Unfortunately, the public has to suffer again.
I don't know if it's suffering though. I mean, when DHHL finances Stanford Card to build 200 units at the Bolodrome and he's using tax credit money, I mean, is the public suffering? I don't know. I guess it depends on what you look at it. I would say that the public is suffering from this current system. It all depends, right? So it's all, you have to weigh everything. There's costs and benefits to every approach.
Mahalo. And what a great way to wrap up and bring us back to our grounding statement that started us off and where we entered this space, and, you know, that willingness of everybody to suffer a little so that no one has to suffer a lot. And I just want to thank all of you for continuing to engage in contribution and investing your time and your expertise into moving the needle forward on this collective vision of a vibrant Hawaii. We are at time, and I want to honor everyone's time. I know you have a lot going on. And so with that, thank you so much for joining us. We will be back all together with my dog in the background next month, every Thursday, 10:30 to noon, and with an opportunity to engage in core teams in subject-specific areas throughout the month. And so please do reach out and stay connected. The real action and deep conversation happens in our core teams. And so I encourage you to plug in there. And if not, we will see you next month. Mahalo nui, Kenna, for joining us. Mahalo, everyone. Aloha.